want to spend a minute talking about apparent wind. Apparent wind can be our friend, but if we don't understand it, it becomes our enemy. So let's think about apparent wind. Imagine I'm standing on a beach. The wind is blowing 10 knots of wind into my face. That's the true wind. I'm stationary. The wind I'm experiencing is the true wind. If I turn away from that wind and start running down the beach, if I'm now running at 5 knots, I'm actually only experiencing 5 knots of wind in my location. If I stop and I'm stationary, the wind is now 10 knots again. If I turn and run towards the wind, I'm actually going to experiencing more wind than the true wind. This wind, when you're moving, we call the apparent wind. Catamarans use it really, really well. I can be sailing along, I can be going 8 knots. If I turn off, I might be doing 8 knots in 15 knots of wind. I turn away from the wind, my boat's still traveling at 8 knots. As I travel away from the wind, all of a sudden my boat's only experiencing 7 knots of wind, a mere zephyr. This is the time to be furling sails, putting reefs in, doing any other jobs you need to do whilst the apparent wind is light. As your boat slows down, the true wind is going to catch it and the wind will increase. But that first moment, that first 30 seconds, 1 minute, the apparent wind is going to be your friend. In a monohull, you might bear into the wind to furl your headsail. Do that on a catamaran. You're doing 8 knots, you round up, you've got centrifugal force, all of a sudden your boat's experiencing more wind, now it's doing 10 knots, now it's doing 12 knots. You're doing 12 knots into the wind, you had 15 knots of wind, you've now got nearly 30 knots of wind. You're trying to furl away, sails are flapping and crashing, going crazy. Apparent winds become your enemy. You want to use the apparent wind to your advantage. You want to bear away and do an experiment. Jump on your catamaran, go for a sail, get it moving well, and then bear away from the wind and feel what happens to the wind. It literally disappears. A well-designed performance cruising catamaran can sail at wind speed. It can sail faster than the wind, or at least the speed of the wind. Learn about apparent wind. It will become your friend.